Hello. I think driving is a good time for contemplation, meditation, don't you? So today's topic is going to be consumption, taxes, and investment. And I wrote an article about this, but I want to share some thoughts about a specific type of thing. So we look at two kinds of transactions in Wall Street. One is kind of a win-win, and you can figure out what that means, but it's basically where both parties win. And a win-lose. A big win-lose example that everyone knows was the housing crisis. So there were hedge funds betting that people were going to foreclose on their houses, basically betting that people were going to bankrupt. So in that case, you've got one winner and one loser. And that's always a bad thing because you have kind of a victim. And there are lots of examples of win-lose situations. You could have a currency trade where the proponent could manipulate the currency, destroy the local economy, make a lot of money, and people are suffering. The whole economy is suffering. So that's obviously a win-lose. But there's another element to a win-win I want to discuss, and that is what you do with your profits. So, because there's two issues with the win-win about ethics. One, how do you make the money? And if it's a win-win, it's probably going to be an ethical thing, because if there's no loser, then that's a good thing. But one thing that people don't talk about, because there's freedom, and I don't dispute freedom. The one great thing about our economy in America is freedom. And taxes do not represent freedom. Taxes represent slavery. So if taxes are done away with, which I think is a great idea, and we move to a tariff system, which is much more fair, we're still going to need revenue, and we're still going to need to limit consumption. And I think taxes are just a very, very bad way to do that. So let's talk about some alternatives. One alternative is to think about what you do with the money. So most people, when they invest, they're looking for a return either to fund their retirement, beat inflation. Most people are just looking to finance their lifestyles, finance their families, basically. Now, when you get into the ultra high net worth class, or even the just ultra net worth class, and we're not going to talk about a number here, but let's say if you've already got more than one residence, you don't need 5 residences, okay? If you have one Patek Philippe $1 million watch, that's fine, but you don't need 100 of them. And there are people like that out there, okay? So we can't really prevent people to do whatever they want with the money. But we can discourage useless consumption. And why would we want to do that? Because if, let's say, you've got two billionaires and each has $1 billion in profit. One billionaire, let's call this billionaire Mr. E. Mr. E takes that $1 billion and he creates a startup. He invests all of it in a startup. And that startup creates jobs, creates value. It creates society. Any society is a collection of strong families. Part of the reason the deep state wanted to destroy the family with the trans culture, with homosexuality, is because you can't compromise a strong family. So if you come to my family, there's no amount of money that I would sell my wife for. Like, they say that everything is for sale. Well, that's true to a certain extent. Okay? I'm not going to murder my family, for example, for any amount of money. I'm not going to leave my family for any amount of money. So that's why the deep state and the controllers, we call them the deep state, that's not really a good term, but whatever you want to call them, the people that rules, the owners, let's call them the owners. The owners of our society, they want individuals that don't have strong families that they can manipulate. Because if you have a family, what else do you need? What did RFK say at the hearing? He said, I don't want to be sitting here talking to you guys. I want to be with my family. I have a happy family. I have a great life. Families are good. And people have hobbies. They like to read or ride horses or paint pictures or make music or sing songs or run, or there's all kinds of things people like to do. And most people invest and work in order to have this kind of leisure time. The one good book about this is the Thorstein Veblen, The Theory of the Leisure Class, where basically after the Industrial Revolution, people started having more leisure time. During feudalism 500,000 years ago, you had either you were a king or a duke, and You had servants and slaves, or you worked in the fields, and what you worked for that day, you planted your potatoes and you ate your potatoes, and that was it. And the king just took your taxes, So only modern times do people have the luxury to read books, even if you want, or look at internet, right? Watch movies and stuff, leisure class. So most people want to invest for those reasons. So it's okay. That's okay. People should do that. What we need to try to discourage is this excess consumption, because what it's doing, it's basically destroying value. So destroying value is, imagine you have this billionaire, let's call him Mr. X. So Mr. E starts a business, and that business hires people and creates jobs. And traditionally, that's how we've always created jobs in the United States, is by, the way we've created growth is through jobs. That's how we don't really give, we have charities, but we like to give people jobs because jobs create value, and then also it makes you feel good. You do a job, and there's lots of skilled people out there doing lots of things that you really earn your money and you feel good, and that's what a strong society is built on. It's good, strong ethics. And you need ethics, because without ethics, society just collapses. It's not about doing the right thing. It's about living in idiocracy. If everyone is a thief and a scammer and a bad guy, then you can't build a society. And that's what's happening in California. Like, they've legalized stealing. You go into CVS and there's no products because everything is stolen. That's not society. So Mr. X, the billionaire, he takes that $1 billion and he withdraws it from the bank in $100 bills, and he burns it. He lights it on fire, and he inhales the fumes. That's how he gets high. He inhales the fumes from his $1 billion. So after that Mr. X experience, he's going to have a hangover because it's toxic. Whatever kind of rush he gets is short-lived. It's not permanent. And he's not building any value. So now here's going back to the Mr. E. So those families that are employed for this startup, the startup's going to grow, probably, at least a little bit. And those families are going to save their money, some of them. And some of those savers may save up or earn $1 billion and do it again. So it's a sustainable system, because the growth becomes self-perpetuating. And this is the key difference between the win-win and the win-lose. The win-lose, or the criminal mafia economy, you always need another victim. The problem with that system, even if, let's say, that ethically we're okay with it, you always need another victim. You're not able to... Whereas with the Mr. E, with the win-win, it's self-perpetuating. So let's say Mr. E creates all this, and then he dies. He's hit by a bus. The company still exists. You haven't destroyed anything. In the case of Mr. X, after he sniffs his $1 billion up his nose in flames, he gets hit by a bus. There's no more $1 billion. There's no more Mr. X. There's just nothing. What are the rest of the people going to do? So here's the point. We don't live, none of us, even if you're a hermit that lives in Alaska and you never see people, all of us have some connection to society, with the exceptions of some tribal people living in the forest in Indonesia, on that island near Thailand. We're all connected in some way. So in America, at least, if we want to have a golden age, we need to have a foundation of a sustainable, ethical business model that is self-perpetuating. And part of that is to discourage useless consumption and to discourage hoarding. So this isn't a solution. There are smarter people in the world than me, much smarter, and they're going to have a solution to how we can discourage hoarding and useless consumption. My point is that in addition to looking at the win-win aspect of a transaction, in other words, a win-win is okay, we have to be looking at what people are doing with the money. Are they supporting their families? Or are they doing some ridiculous things? Are they burning that money? And we can't prohibit the destruction of value because we need to respect free will. We need to allow people to make choices themselves. We can't impose laws that say you can only buy one Patek Philippe watch. I like the watch example because people are really crazy about watches. I don't see why you need 100 Patek Philippe watches, that you collect watches. It's just absurd. And I'm not a watch guy. I understand it. It's like you have a watch for breakfast, you have a watch when the moon is waning, and a watch for Christmas when your in-laws are visiting and all this. But do you really need 5,000 watches? I mean, there are people who have entire closets for their watches. And people have some strange hobbies. I'm saying the point is that you need to find a way, we need to find a way to discourage useless consumption and to encourage investment. So we need to encourage, and we can do this with not taxes, but for example, a luxury tax is one idea where you can buy one Patek Philippe or whatever kind of watch, whatever kind of luxury goods. The first one you get, or the first two, or even three. I mean, we can be very reasonable. It's just like whatever the market price is. But then if you get 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, there's going to be a luxury tax. And that luxury tax is going to be 100%, 200%. It's going to be something insane. Or here's where your income tax kicks in. Like there's no income tax, but if you have 50 watches, then you have to pay 50% income tax or whatever, something like that. The second thing we can do, we can provide incentives, grants for people to invest. So for example, if you invest $1 billion in a startup, the government, let's say, is going to match you, or let's say there's a big NGO, we could all create a big nonprofit, a billionaire nonprofit, like the Jedi Knights. We all get together and we chip in a couple billion each, and it's a $1 billion fund. Maybe we get some government money, maybe not. That's not the point. The point is you invest $1 billion in a startup and it works, we double it. We give you another $1 billion. We put it into the coffers of the company. We send every employee on a 2-week paid vacation to Hawaii or whatever. I mean, something like an incentive. Pay people. That's a good incentive. When you give them money, and people who are normal people, like employees, they have hobbies. They go out and they buy DJ equipment or paintbrushes or whatever. They do cool stuff with it. And there seems to be, the people are either normal or they're in part of this kind of useless eater class. And when I say useless eaters, I mean they're the ones that are really destroying the value. So it's not going to be solved by me just brainstorming. Okay, that's not the point. The point is that's where we need to start thinking. So let's think about it. Let's put our thinking caps on, as they used to say in school, and let's make some reasonable rules, and let's lead by example. In other words, we don't have to codify this into a law. We can have business leaders who sort of just loosely agree to something and start doing it, start living it, and then we'll have examples, real life examples of how this works. This is Joseph Gillette. I hope you have a great day. Be safe out there. Good luck.